Okay, let's jump right into this because we are looking at a story today that completely flipped my understanding of human history on its head. I want you to picture something with me for a second. Imagine you're sitting in a modern, neon-lit cocktail bar in New York, or maybe Tokyo. You know, the ice is clinking, the music is playing. It really feels like the absolute peak of modern civilization, right? Well, I want us to do a rapid mental zoom backward. We're flying out of that bar, backward through time, 10 million years into the past, and we are landing right in the middle of a dense, primeval rainforest. Because the wild truth is, every single modern drink actually traces back to a survival mechanism that is hardwired into our very DNA. Today, in this explainer, we are exploring how alcohol literally built human civilization. But right out of the gate, we have to address this massive, glaring biological mystery. Why doesn't alcohol just kill us? I mean, if you really think about it, ethanol is a toxin. But processing ethanol isn't some modern luxury we just figured out how to do. Our ability to break it down safely is this ancient mechanism deeply embedded in human biology. Long before we invented agriculture, long before we could write or build permanent settlements, our ancient ancestors were actively consuming alcohol. And to understand how they survived it, we have to look at a genuinely shocking evolutionary story. So the answer to our mystery is known in scientific circles as the Drunken Monkey Hypothesis. Basically, this is the evolutionary theory that our attraction to alcohol is absolutely no accident. It was a vital adaptation for identifying incredibly calorie-rich, ripe fruits. See, alcohol didn't start out as a recreational luxury for us. It was actually the ultimate evolutionary hack. It was a biological loophole that quite literally saved our early species from total extinction. To see how this all played out, we're going to track a timeline, starting with the massive climate shift 10 million years ago, moving to the first brews in Jiahu, China, around 7000 BCE, and finally looking at the rise of the first Sumerian cities. Let's start right at the beginning. Chapter 1, 10 million years ago, and the genetic glitch that changed everything. Picture East Africa, 10 million years ago. There's this massive climate shift happening, and it's drying up the rainforests, which is forcing our tree-dwelling ancestors down onto the very dangerous forest floor. And what did they find down there? Rotting, overripe fruits. Now, these fruits had interacted with wild yeasts on the ground, which converted their organic sugars into pure ethanol. For almost any other mammal in that forest, eating this fermented fruit meant severe toxic poisoning, or at best, a total loss of coordination that would instantly turn them into an easy snack for the nearest predator. Basically, it was a death sentence. But here's where it gets crazy. The secret for us comes down to the number 40. Around 10 million BCE, a critical genetic mutation happened in our lineage. A specific gene, the ADH4 gene, mutated. And this created an enzyme inside our ancestors' bodies that was capable of metabolizing ethanol 40 times faster than any other primate. I mean, 40 times. That is just a staggering evolutionary leap. Because of that one mutation, our early ancestors could absolutely gorge on fermenting fruit. They gained double the caloric energy from it. But, and this is the absolute key here, they remained completely sober. They were alert, they were fast, they could still outrun predators. Alcohol literally became our primary survival food. We survived when others starved simply because we could eat the rotting fruit and still walk away in a straight line. Fast forward a few million years, and that brings us to Chapter 2, 7000 BCE, and the Neolithic Brew Revolution. By this point, humanity had moved from just scavenging accidental alcohol to actively engineering it. And the proof is in Jiahu, China. There was this incredible archaeological chemistry done by Patrick McGovern at the University of Pennsylvania, and they uncovered the world's oldest confirmed biomolecular evidence of a brewed beverage. The scientists actually isolated these chemical fingerprints of tartaric acid and beeswax from porous fragments of ancient clay pottery. And you know, these aren't just random residues, this is hard physical evidence of intentional human chemistry. What's even cooler is those chemical fingerprints let researchers perfectly recreate the ancient recipe itself. It was a mix of rice, wild honey, and fermented hawthorn fruits. I absolutely love this detail because it shows that this wasn't just some happy accident, like someone tripping into a puddle of fermented juice. This was a precise, deliberate mixture. It was early, masterful chemistri. And that chemical mastery spread like wildfire. Over at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is widely considered one of the oldest human monuments we've ever discovered, archaeologists found these massive limestone vats capable of holding up to 40 gallons of liquid, showing undeniable evidence of early grain fermentation. Think about that for a second.
The earliest human gathering places, our very first attempts at monumental architecture, were quite literally designed around the shared communal consumption of alcohol.
Which perfectly sets up Chapter 3, and honestly my favorite part of this, the plot twist: beer versus bread. So, mainstream history has always told us that early humans settled down to bake bread, right? But there is this radical new data-driven theory that suggests we didn't settle down for bread at all. We settled down to brew beer. See, early wild grains were incredibly difficult to harvest, and baking them into bread give you a pretty minimal caloric payout for all that backbreaking labor. But when you took those same grains, soaked them, and left them to ferment, you got ancient beer. Now, this wasn't like a clear, modern lager. This was a thick, nutrient-rich, B vitamin-heavy liquid. And most importantly, the alcohol content naturally killed off lethal pathogens and bacteria. It was vastly safer to drink than raw, bacteria-filled river water. It gave them hydration, massive calories, and clean nutrition all at the exact same time. So the need to secure these massive, reliable fields of grain for consistent brewing forced humanity to innovate. We had to build permanent irrigation systems to water the crops. We had to build massive storehouses to protect the grain. And to manage that whole operation, we built the very first cities of Sumer and Mesopotamia. Our thirst for beer quite literally anchored us to the land and laid the physical foundations for all of urban civilization. Which brings us to our final chapter, sacred intoxication, and the legacy that still lives in our blood today. Once civilization was up and running, alcohol wasn't treated as a casual weekend habit. It was a fundamentally sacred pillar of society. Take ancient Egypt. The workers who built the Great Pyramids, they weren't just given water to survive the grueling desert heat, they were literally paid in a daily ration of 4 to 5 liters of thick, low-alcohol beer. That beer was relied upon as a vital daily source of strength and safe hydration to pull off one of the greatest architectural feats in history. And moving over to classical Greece and Rome, the cultural reverence went even deeper. The actual chemical process of fermentation, where sweet fruit juice just mysteriously bubbles and turns into an intoxicating wine, was so completely misunderstood that it was seen as literal divine intervention. It was pure magic to them. It was worshipped directly through gods like Dionysus and Bacchus. To the ancients, alcohol was the literal breath of the gods. And you know, this ancient history builds perfectly into how we understand ourselves today. When we look at our own bodies, our biological attraction to alcohol is not some modern design flaw or psychological weakness. It's an evolutionary echo. Your liver's unique ability to process a drink tonight is a direct biological inheritance from a starving primate trying to survive on a drying African savanna 10 million years ago. As the quote goes, every modern drink traces back to a survival mechanism hardwired into your DNA. This completely shatters the myth that our relationship with alcohol is purely recreational. Historically, biologically, ethanol meant the absolute literal difference between starvation and survival. It is woven into the very fabric of who we are as a species. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember this. The next time you're out, the next time you raise a glass with friends, realize that you aren't just partaking in some modern social custom. You are actively tapping into a 10 million-year-old biological survival mechanism. You're participating in the exact same ancient drive that forced our ancestors out of the trees, taught us early chemistry, and ultimately built human civilization from the ground up. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder. If our ancient thirst for alcohol was actually a hidden survival hack, what other modern vices are actually ancient evolutionary survival tools, just waiting to be discovered in our DNA? It completely changes how you view human behavior, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.